The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to another episode of the Stoned Apes podcast, and it is the Reverend and the Captain, and we are joined by a incredibly special guest today. We have the Reverend's very favorite music artist ever, Otep Shamaya. How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you,
Well,
guys.
I'm going to embarrass you for a minute, but I got to tell a story about how I discovered you. And we have to go back a long time, 2000, 2001. I was back in the military, and my friend went to a music store named Sam Goody. Remember when they had music stores?
I
And yeah,
do.
that was the
Yeah,
thing. And the
that was
woman that
awesome.
worked at the music store had asked, or gave us a suggestion for a CD, and it said Otep on it, and it was Sevestra, and and I said okay, and then she goes, "Oh, it's a female metal singer," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds amazing, right?" And so we get out there and we go into my truck, and we throw it in, and it was we got past the introduction, and it was about 3 seconds in the blood picked, and I went, "Oh my God, can you believe the voice on this woman?" It was absolutely the most jaw-dropping, powerful thing that I had ever got to hear, and I have been hooked ever since. So,
Thank,
and 20 years of absolute fandom, and being able to meet you and have you here on this podcast is an honor.
thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it was a great record to write. Wrote with Terry Date, and we spent about 6 weeks in Seattle writing it. I think it was during October, so it was like a permanent ceiling of cloud in Seattle. So I think that kind of helped add the atmosphere of that record because it was already coming in really, really hard, heavy, and emotional. And it's still we still play the majority of our set. We go on tour is mostly from Sevestra because classics.
Yeah,
Art
absolutely.
art is forever.
Went to Iraq in 2003, and we had um we had I had Slipknot, I had Mushroom Head, and I had OTEP. And so when I was over there, your CD had really been it was very pivotal to allowing me to make it through that time of my life. And it more than just your music, but it was the words and the lyrics, and how you put everything together, all the way down to especially your poems. Thoughts was a big one for me. The sirens sharpen their rocks,
Mhm.
and it was the way that you had wrote it, your replacement of the word I for the
Mhm.
EYE. And I
Yeah.
still write that today on occasion when appropriate. And so I wanted to thank you for that personally. I wanted to take a moment and just say thank you. Your music was very influential to me, and pivotal in my life, and I appreciate that. Do you get to hear that from a lot of your military fans?
I do, and let me say thank you for your service. I come from a military family, and I mean almost every every branch we've served in since as far back as we can go in our history. So thank you for that. And I get a lot of military folks coming, active and veterans who will come and to the shows I've had, especially when we were uh, uh, in actively at war in a couple of places, and they would come in their fatigues, and they would give me their dog tags. They've given me their medals. They've given me one woman who was in the Marine Corps. She was on leave from Afghanistan, and she gave me her hat. And I still have it, and it still smells like sweat in the desert. It still smells like sweat and sand. Um, I'm always very grateful for that because my brother was I've lost two brothers, um, and one was recent, and he I was about a year and a half ago, I think. Hard to keep up. But then I lost another brother back in he was in the Navy 2001. So that I've always taken that very seriously, and I'm always very honored. And I'm very honored to be here. And
Oh, well.
it's always surprising to me. And it's interesting you brought up Thoughts, because Thoughts was actually written, a part of that was written about what was happening in Afghanistan at the time. Because I started writing it like right after 9/11, and as we went into war there, and we were sending people in. So I was a few of those lines was inspired by um, not only the nefarious enemy that we destroyed, luckily, but and happily, but also because of the brave women and men who served our country so valiantly during those times and still do. So thank you very much for your service and sacrifice, and your family as well. I know that sometimes gets overlooked, the families of people who they sacrifice as well. So I appreciate you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you, and my condolences to your brother that died, and both of them as well, and especially for services, and you know, I can't imagine how many lives you've impacted in the military. Like I said, I know my story couldn't be that rare. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask the question, because your lyrics are so powerful, you know. And you mentioned Thoughts, and the first line that went
Mm,
in my head was that, you know, what is I hopefully I don't get this wrong, but is you know, vomit a world of truth and agony, right?
mm,
And
mhm,
your throbbing illness of memory, and that just, man, that just rung true to me. And here I am 20 years later, and I can still repeat it.
mm.
So
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
that's something really important. But so let's talk a little bit about early history. Here you are, it's 2000s, you're on the metal scene. You got people like me that are living in the Midwest that, you know, metal music and women, not really a thing. What was that like for you?
um, Being a woman in the metal scene.
Yeah. Was that
Uh,
difficult? I mean, how was that received by other people?
well, it wasn't, funny enough. In the beginning, I think when people saw me, because um, I'm from Los Angeles, and we played. Um, uh, there's a really strong local scene here because everybody kind of comes to Los Angeles to like get discovered, So we have a pretty strong local scene. So we were just that. We were just a local band, rehearsing a lot, playing a lot. I mean, not a whole lot because we got signed after 5 or 6 shows, but without a demo. But it was because of the impact that we were making on the scene. And when you have a scene like Los Angeles, or say something like New York City, where people get a little jaded because everybody's playing, so they kind of feel like they've seen everything. And when I would come up, I think they probably thought I was going to grab a bass or something, because that's usually typically the stereotype of what a woman does in like any sort of band, plays bass or keys. And I grabbed the mic, and then all of a sudden, boom, I got the mosh is going and everything's going crazy. And so, and then we played Ozfest, and I remember coming out and kind of like some cheers and boos and stuff. And then as soon as we started, everybody was like, there was silence at first. And so that was a little bit alarming, because you never want really silence at your shows, especially at a big giant festival like that. And then after it was over, we had a banner up behind us that had Otep on it, and they started chanting Otep, Otep. And so that I knew, like, okay, this is going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it, because in the beginning, a lot of our shows were mostly male, and maybe they brought their girlfriends or their sisters or their cousins or whatever with them. And then suddenly it's like now it's like the first 5 rows are women, and they're just getting crushed by people behind them. So, if in the beginning it was, I'd get a lot of things like, if I did a meet and greet with fans early on, when I still do them, but early on when I did them, people would say things like, you scream pretty good for a girl. And I'm thinking, like, for a girl, like, why do you gotta genderize it? Like, why do you gotta
Right.
put it in that box? Like, why can't I just scream? Why can't I just scream? But what I'm most happy about is not what I can do with. I mean, I'm happy that I'm able to do all the things that I can do with my voice, but it's more about my words and my lyrics and the things that you mentioned earlier. Those things matter most to me. They always have. You mentioned how I wrote EYE instead of I. Well, I was a big, and I still am, but I was really a big Beat Poet fan in those days. So I got a lot of that wordplay from Ginsberg and Kerouac and those cats, who really were attacking the sort of the puritanical poetry is supposed to be, Walt Whitman, and very, societal. It's not supposed to be something that's like street poetry, and that's what those cats brought along. They kind of revolutionized it, and for me that hit me pretty well and pretty hard. So I wanted to bring that influence into everything else that I was
Well, you know what
That's
got
cool.
me as a fan, and I think a lot of this interview is probably going to be me talking as a fan because it's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on the podcast. It was the range and diversity of your music, and I think that did a lot for me because there was a lot of other bands at the time, and Slipknot, I have a lot of love and appreciation for them, but their music was very one dimensional at the time, especially
doing.
like with Iowa. And your music, be with the poetry, with songs like My Confession, for example, was another
Mm.
one, right? That was somewhere in between a song and a poem. And it had this really interesting mix to it. And there was so much diversity on that first CD that's really what got me hooked. And that and the incredible voice. I mean, there's a power to your voice that you just don't find in other bands in this genre. And then the range that you had, and then you go on to really highlight that later. So yeah, I think that was really incredible. But that leads me to my next question. So my next question is, as somebody who's been a fan of your music for a long time, I will say that Otep doesn't have a style, at least not in my opinion. When you listen to the CDs, each CD is so unique to itself. And all the way down to, there's some releases that we probably talk about a little bit later, like You're a Woman Now, which is a
Mm.
completely different spin on what you would expect to hear when you hear Otep. So I would like to ask you, what was going on in your life? Obviously you were somebody who writes from the heart, somebody who's writes from personal experience. What was going on in your life during those different CDs that created such a diversity in your art? Or did you always have that diversity and you were just looking to showcase it?
Well, this is my ninth album now. So it's difficult to remember everything that was going on during all of those times over 20 years. But um, I think that what drew me into the idea of this genre of new metal, that somebody came up with, was that there were no boundaries, right? You just brought in whatever inspiration you had at the moment. And that's what I found so fascinating about it, because I was writing the first thing I ever did creatively, I was drawing before I could speak. So, and then when I kept drawing a lot, and I come from sort of we grew up real poor, but my mother was very insistent that we were going to, because my mom is extremely smart, and I mean, genius level smart. So it was very important to her that we were also, like, we put education first, and so I wish I'd have done a little bit more of that in school, but I didn't. So because art was the most important thing to me. So what I would get in trouble a lot for drawing at school, and then people started asking me, well, what is this about? Because everything would be so intricate, all the drawings would be so intricate. So then I got, I don't know, I guess I kind of got a little frustrated having to explain what every drawing was about. So then I started writing stories about what every drawing was about. And then when I found that, I fell in love with writing, and I moved into that world. Then when I found poetry, I moved into that world. So for me, I was trying to bring in everything that had inspired me to whatever music I was going to make at the time. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't know if it was going to be heavy or what it was going to be. And I just found some musicians that again, my original drummer, Moke, he had worked with Dr. Dre, doing hip hop beats, but also could play metal and rock and jazz and blues. And then my bass player at the time, he was, Berkeley trained, played jazz, but also was really into Meshuggah and like different time signatures and things like that. So he brought that in, and the guitar player at the time, he brought in, his own influences, which he also included like hip hop, rock, and metal. So when we sat down to write the first record, the only rule was there's no rules. Like, bring in whatever is inspiring you, like bring that to us. And then if it inspires us, then, that's what the true sort of spiritual intercourse of creativity for me, that's what draws me in and has kept me making music for all this time. Songs like You're a Woman Now, songs like My Confession, songs like Perfectly Flawed, um, Boss, which is another one. Those songs have always lived in me. They just didn't have they just weren't formed yet. They were still finding where they were supposed to exist. And when they finally found their place, I mean, I was met with a very similar reaction from the labels. When they first heard, so I wrote Perfectly Flawed first, sort of the first ballad, and I wrote that with a songwriter named Holly Knight. She wrote Love is a Battlefield, Pat Benatar. She's in the Songwriters Hall of Fame, Holly Knight. So I brought that into the label. They're listening to the record and they hear Perfectly Flawed and they go, I remember this. I was in my A&R's office, which I don't think that position exists anymore, which sucks, but because they were in charge of artist development. But he turned around in his chair, spun around and looked at me and he goes, "That's not an Otep song." And I said, "I'm Otep. I wrote it. I'm singing it. It's an Otep song." And he said, "But it's not heavy." And I said, "Well, things don't have to be heavy to be heavy. You know, did you listen to what I was saying? Did you listen to the words? You know, this is an anti-body shaming. This is about, you know, accepting yourself for who you are. This is it's an important song for a lot of people who deal with that, and they never got behind it. And so, and now I'm very proud of it. It's, besides my name, when people get tattoos, Perfectly Flawed is probably the second most popular tattoo that people get. And with You're a Woman Now, I mean, really, when I started writing, it started out as a poem, and it was really about the idea of the different ways in which different societies and cultures measure what it is to be a woman, and when do you become a woman as a little girl. And I'm not trying to get into any sort of gender politics or anything like that. I'm just talking about this idea. Is it when you know, in the old days, it was when she got married, she's a woman now. The other, in some parts of the world, it's when you lose your virginity. And then, and so I addressed it. Well, what if she gets raped? That's the first verse of that song. It's a date rape gone, you know, it's a date gone bad, date rape. And is she a woman now? Because that was stolen from her without consent. The second verse is about the horrible practice of female circumcision, genital mutilation in certain parts of the world. And that's when they say she's a woman. And so, you know, that's one. And so that was a very difficult part to write, very difficult verse. But then the third verse is actually autobiographical. I remember my mother taking me to the welfare office so that we could get food stamps and some government cheese. And I was very, very young, but I remember this. My mom's amazed I remember it. And I guess it imprinted on me so heavy, because I remember how it was, I could feel her embarrassment a little bit, because she was, you know, she was embarrassed to be in there, or just, I don't know if it was embarrassment to be there, but I think that she was just nervous about what she could do to keep her kids fed and clothed and housed. And I remember, and it's in the song, her saying, "We're going to get our own place. We're going to be okay. Don't worry." And that's, to me, that was a woman, a mother taking care of her kids, doing whatever it took, no matter if it was embarrassing, no matter if it was humiliating, no matter if it was, you know, whatever obstacle was placed in front of her, she was going to do what was right for her family. And that's, to me, was what a woman was for that. And again, no gender politics or anything like that.
Oh no, I think you
Yeah.
did a great job. That was
Oh, thank
beautiful.
you.
And you know, one of the things that I'd like to say on that is, just like I talked about earlier about taking your CD with me to Iraq, and how influential that was. I feel like your music, especially in songs like You're a Woman Now, it gives a voice to people who typically don't have a voice, and your words become their voice, and that makes it more powerful because you can understand the meaning and the emotion that's behind it. And that brings me to, you know, in a theme, and I think it is Perfectly Flawed. It deals with suicide a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
the concept of suicide and not taking your life, and you know, it's something to live for. And that's a big theme in the military community, right? Because we have the 22 a day. You know, have you done
That's right.
any outreach work with any military organizations with preventative suicide?
Well, I haven't done, I've I've been involved with some organizations. I did do the 22 push-up challenge for when that was a thing, you know. But I would like to do more for the military community as much as I can. I just don't want to barge in and go, I'm here to help, you know. If someone wants me to help, I will, and gladly, because again, um, one of my uncles served 25 years in the Air Force. My father was served as well. Two of my brothers served in the Navy. My grandfather served in the Navy. I mean, almost every branch actually of the military. So I come from that world, and I know what it's like to worry and actually not to have a loved one come home. So, and then I also to have loved ones come home and then suffer from PTSD. And one of my one of my uh, cousins, he suffered really bad PTSD, and he ended up taking his own life. And he was trying to get help with the VA, and the VA, I think, was doing the best they could during that time with what they had. But unfortunately, just he was just in a world of hurt, couldn't get
It's a
out of it.
shame.
So it is. He was a good guy, and we miss him a lot. And so that's why, you know, for me, it's always. I remember This is back when I wrote Warhead, and you know, I wrote Warhead for a very specific cause because I didn't believe that I supported the us going after Bin Laden in Afghanistan because that's where he was hiding. I did not support the invasion of Iraq. No disrespect, but I just didn't. As a person who had family in the military, I did not want them going someplace that didn't attack us. It didn't matter. It didn't, like, why aren't we in Saudi Arabia or Egypt even? But I remember I wrote Warhead, and after it was over, I did one show, and some of the fans booed because they thought I was attacking the troops when I was actually attacking the leadership, the political leadership of the country at the time, which is Bush, Cheney, and all those jackasses. And I remember after the show, someone came to me to the bus and they said, "Hey, somebody wants to buy." We had a little banner that we hung above our merch table. They said, "Oh, somebody wants to buy your banner." And I said, "Oh, well, we need that banner for merch." And they said, "Oh, well, they want to pay us $500 for it." And I was like, "Oh, well, I'll take that." And they said, "Well, they'll only pay it if you autograph it." I was like, "Sure, okay." I said, and so I came off the bus and met with them, and I met this man and woman who they were just got back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Both of them served in both places, I think, and they were going back, even though they were against the war. And, and first of all, I said, "I'm not taking your money. Just take the banner. Thank you for your service." And then I asked them, and they were in cities, so you know they spoke as freely as they could, and they just said to me, you know, what you do for us, we can't speak out. Thank you for speaking out. And then I said, well, and this is before this was still Tel was in place, and they were both gay, but they pretended to be boyfriend girlfriend over there to make sure they didn't get in any trouble. And I said, okay, so why are you going back? And they said, because our friends are there. And man, that hit me so hard. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going back for your friends, and for your country, of course, but your friends are there, and they didn't want to leave their friends behind. So I gave them the banner, I gave them some merch, I gave them whatever they wanted. I was just like, you guys, and I heard from them years later, and they were, you know, after all that had happened and gone away, and they still thank me for that. And I just, you know, trying not to get emotional here, but it was an emotional moment for me because I'm in awe of the military community, truly,
Yeah,
the
well,
majority.
go ahead.
So you've released 9 records or 9 albums now, and you said
Yes.
that, you know, the gentleman said this is an OTEP, and you said, well, this is me singing. Now that you're on number 9, how do you? I mean, do you look back and say, well, look at me now, like you were wrong all the time, or like how do you handle something like that?
Oh yeah, I'm petty.
Right?
I mean, it's like, come on, man. I mean,
I
the
would be
thing
too.
is, yeah, it's Forgive if you guys hear the sirens. Sorry, I live in Los Angeles, so you will hear sirens in LA.
No, you're fine.
Sorry. The they'll go. It's
We
probably
can't
some
hear it.
cops
You're
here.
fine.
You
Yeah,
guys can't
you're
hear.
good.
Okay.
Nah.
It's like crazy loud here. They're probably going to lunch. Anyway, they run the lights here. They just turn on their trees so they can run the lights. But anyway, yes, I do. I will take great pleasure in succeeding when people have told me that I can't or that I won't. And I hopefully it's an example for others who have been told, no, you can't do that, or no, you're not able to do that because of this or this, or society doesn't, well, who makes these rules? Who makes these rules? I mean, the whole idea of genre and limiting yourself to only this very small box of music or art or life or culture, you're limiting your own human experience. So
Agreed.
when my A&R moved on to become a music manager. I think he used to roadie for Metallica like a long time ago. And then he went to Capitol Records. And then I think he went back to music management. But I reached out to him years later and I sent him a bunch of pictures of people with perfectly flawed tattoos. And I was like, how you like me? Like what, dude? But I learned after Seventh Straw and after House of Secrets came out, and it was so different. It was like a concept album that people there are certain people out there that will listen to something and go, I hate this. I hate it. This isn't you. This doesn't sound like your other record. And then a few years later, they're like, oh, House of Secrets is my favorite album. Same people. Same people. So I'm now to the point where if I feel like I'm being honest as an artist and I'm writing what I believe in, and when I perform it, people see that I believe in it, then they will believe in it as well. I got some pushback even from some of my touring musicians when I wrote Apex Predator. It's kind of like a goth, like industrial hip hop song or something, in a way, because it's spoken. It's not really sung or screamed or anything like that. And they said, "Oh, the fans are going to hate it. The fans are going to hate it." Sure enough, no, they didn't. They loved it. They were singing. They were singing the lyrics on the first show of the tour. Same thing happened with Equal Rights, Equal Lefts. People were like, "Oh, that's a song about equality," and it's like it's a trap beat, and people aren't going to like it. Wrong. As soon as we went out first show, people knew the lyrics. They were. I had to just I put the mic out to the crowd, like, "See, y'all."
What
So
goes
I,
what goes through you when that happens? Like I just get goosebumps thinking about it. I can't imagine being on the
mm.
stage and hearing them doing that for you.
Oh, it's my soul is carbonated. I mean, it just feels it's amazing. I mean, it's one of the I like I said, I grew up really poor and not with and there weren't a lot of prospects. It was either like you do dirt, you get a little dirty, make a little money somehow, whatever you do, or you go into like you get a trade or something like that. There wasn't a lot of options for me. So for someone like me who like read poetry and wrote and drew pictures and things, like those things didn't really matter in those neighborhoods I grew up in. Like, can you fight or can you run? And then I could do both. So, but I could
Not a
also do
girl.
the other things. Yeah, thank you, man. And I grew up with a bunch of brothers, so that was a big deal too. And so there was always competition there, but I never, in my wildest dreams, would have imagined that I would be even having this opportunity to speak to you two gentlemen here today about something that I've created. Never in my life would I expect some person. I did a Instagram live the other day, and there was someone from Morocco that came on, and or they lived in Morocco. Now they've moved someplace else. Respect their Morocco with that earthquake right now, but they'd moved someplace else, and I was getting people talking to me that were like in Brazil and Japan and places like that, like who know me and have know my lyrics, and that's something that I mean. I don't need no Grammy. I don't need nothing. I don't need a platinum record. I don't need none of that. I've got the best thing that any artist could ever wish for or hope for. And because if you're doing it for that, then for me, in my mind, you're not doing it for art's sake. You're doing it for your own ego, and I've got something that I think is even more precious and more of a blessing, and something that I'll be forever grateful for, is that I have people that actually listen and can relate to the things that I wrote and write, because when I was writing those things, no one in my world could relate to them. And so it was really nice to be able to find people that could, and just be kind of a beacon, a lighthouse in the dark. And I'm just calling all these souls together, and it's pretty amazing.
I think
No,
lighthouse is an understatement.
Oh,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
think what you've done has been fantastic, and that brings me to the conversation why you're here today, because you're promoting a new album called Godslayer, and it is released on September 15th, which happens to be the day that this is going to go live. So hopefully a lot of people are going to get the opportunity to be able to listen to this album. And one of the things that I noticed on this album that really caught me off guard, but then I found a real appreciation for, was that you made the decision on this album to use your voice by doing covers. And I felt like when I first got the album and I seen it and I heard the covers, I thought, okay, that was different. As a fan, that was different for me. But then when I
Yeah,
went back and I listened to them, and I realized your interpretation of those covers is where you were creating your voice, especially like in the Beach Boys song when you did California Girls. And I thought, you know, that was not what I was expecting at all. And I
yeah.
thought you did a beautiful rendition of that, and how much you were able to add to that song without adding any lyrics was amazing. Would you like to
Thank
talk on that a little bit?
Sure. First, thank you for all your kind words. I really appreciate it. I worked, this, so it's actually, this wasn't my idea to do this record this way. This was the label's idea. They approached me during quarantine, and I got a message through one of I think my booking agent, and he said, "Hey, this label wants you to do an album of covers." And I said, "Okay, I've done covers before. I did Royals by Lord. I did Wake Up by Rage Against the
Amazing, by
Machine.
the
I've
way.
covered. Oh, thank you. And I did Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine. I've covered Not to Touch the Earth but the Doors. Nirvana. I did Breathe by Nirvana. Um, and so I thought, well, nothing's happening right now. Everything's quarantine, everything's shut down, and so why not give it a shot? In the beginning, the label they'd given me a list of bands they thought that I should do, and they were all hair metal bands from Europe, and I'd never heard of any of them. No disrespect to anybody, but I just don't listen to hair metal, so I don't know who they are. They're like French hair metal bands. Like, I don't know who these people are. So I knew that I couldn't do them justice. I wouldn't be able to do it. I can't sing high falsettos anyway. Like, it's not my thing. So I have a more of a baritone voice, since 4 years old, by the way. But when I did go in to do this, I approached it from the same way that I did with Royals. I think that kind of shocked a lot of people, that I would cover a song from that's outside, that's like a big pop hit. But I read the lyrics, and that's where everything for me foundationally starts from, especially if it's a song that a genre from outside a genre that I don't listen to, because I don't really listen to pop music. So I read the lyrics, and as a person that grew up poor, and as a person that grew up, still wanting to live life and have, a good time as best we could with what we had. Those lyrics, Lord's lyrics for Worlds meant something to me. I could relate to them, and so that's how I approached the rest of the album. From Billie Eilish, "You Should See Me in a Crown," to the Eminem cover, to California Girls. And uh, when I brought that up with the producer, he was like, "What? The Beach Boys?" And yeah, man, let me just hear me out. So I like true crime documentaries, all that stuff. So I just finished watching the Ted Bundy tapes, and they're pretty dark. So that little docu series is pretty dark, and you could hear him talking about in third person, of course, because he never really wanted to take blame for the evil things that he did. But when I read the lyrics for California Girls, it just connected to me. Like, this seems like a diary out of a serial stalker or a serial killer's notebook that I'm reading. You know, this person is traveling all over the country and sort of dissecting women by what he likes about them, whatever region they're in. And then he wants them all in his hunting ground in California. And so I wanted the song to be as dark as it appeared to me lyrically. The Beach Boys probably didn't mean it this way, or I don't know if they did or not. Who knows back then what their intentions were. But you take a surf pop type song, and you could say anything underneath it. So I went in with the idea that we're going to make this really dark because that's how it affected me. It felt really dark. But also I wanted to sing it from the perspective of the person that I felt wrote it. So there would be some obsession there, there'd be some seduction there, and there would be some evil there as well. And I think we accomplished it. I think we did. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, truly.
Oh,
And
I would agree. I think that it is definitely my favorite song in the album. And I know the first time that I heard it, it gave me goosebumps. It was like the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt uncomfortable. I was like, wow, that was not what I was looking for. So
yeah,
I can.
and go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I just say it's just completely, and I thank you for covering the Billie Eilish song. My daughter is actually a huge Billie Eilish fan, and so when I got on there and I seen that, I thought, oh wow, what diversity that is, and you did an amazing job on that cover as well. So, I found it to be an excellent album. The one song on the album that stood out to me was Godslayer. I was Yeah, I heard the title of the album, Godslayer, and immediately my brain went to like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to hear what type of thunderous metal this is going to be, right? And then it was a poem. And I went, oh. And then I listened to the words and I went, oh, there's a lot of emotion here. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here. And I was trying to really understand like where you were coming from. And I felt the hurt and the pain. Can you explain a little bit about like what went into that song and why did you choose the name Godslayer?
So while I was right, while I was creating the album and covering the songs, and they gave me 3 originals to do, my eldest brother died suddenly, and I felt like, and he was my best friend in the world. He's my best friend in the world. He's the only other gay kid in the family, so I was inspired by him growing up, because he was older than me. And so I saw him. I mean, he came out when he was 14. He was so brave. I mean, this was, came out in the late 80s, like this wasn't a time when young 14-year-old boys should be out, and I mean, it was, this was when the AIDS scare was going on and Reagan was, cutting funding for AIDS patients. And my brother was seeing a lot of his friends pass away from it just because they thought it was a gay disease, and in their minds, God was punishing gay people. And suddenly it starts hitting, middle class, straight Americans, and suddenly it's a terrible, terrible thing, and then the government has to address it. But besides that, my brother was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being, and I was very supportive, not only to me but to everyone in my family, to all of his friends. And he had called me really late. I was asleep, and I felt the phone buzz, and I looked and I saw a missed call, and it was my brother. And I said, oh, I'll just call back tomorrow. And he left me a voicemail. And then the next morning, my mother and one of my other brothers called me on the phone and said, John died. And I was just, whew. There is, I feel that my brother was cheated out of the rest of his life. He had a long life left to live and a lot of love to give in this world. And so when I was writing that, at the same time, I'm a big animal rights person. I'm vegan, okay. But I'm also like, I love animals. My family, we have a private animal sanctuary. We take in livestock from slaughterhouses. We take in dogs, cats. People leave them out in the country. They think that dogs will revert back to their feral ways. That's not what happens, everybody. Don't do that. Find a
Don't do that.
sanctuary. Don't do that. My dad goes out and gets on his little, he has like a little off-road 4x4 little golf cart thing that he goes around, and he just drives around, and there's this one spot where people just dump their dogs out in the middle of the country. And he goes and picks them up. He's got his beer in one hand and driving the other, and a dog in this one, and he's driving with his knee.
He'd fit
And
right
then he
in where
comes
I'm
back
from.
and
Yeah, so it sounds
yeah,
like St. John.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, my family they live out in the hill country outside Austin, Texas. So he comes up and tells my mom, "Hey, we got another one." So to me, my earlier before we started, I was lucky enough to meet your son, and that was very awesome to me. And you guys heard my son, which is my dog. And at the time, after my brother had died, I had a 5-pound Chihuahua who thought she was a Rottweiler. Her name was Chloe Commando, and she developed heart failure, and it was a fatal disease. So after my brother passed, I did everything I could to keep her alive, and then the medicine that she was taking caused renal failure, and she died from medicine. And so there was a whole lot going on at the time, and I was angry. Angry is not the right word. I don't know if there is a word for what I was feeling, but if I could sit down across from the creator, God, whatever it is, and I would have battled that that entity for the souls of my brother and my daughter. Absolutely. Soul for soul. And I would have won. There's no doubt about it. I would have won with the amount of righteous rage and just feeling like life had cheated both of them. I wrote that poem. And even the opening, the opening of the song, that was also the opening of the album starts also with a little bit of a spoken word piece, just like Sevis Tra did my first album with Tortured. This one starts the same way, and it's calling for them to give me strength to finish this album, because I was in the midst of writing the record when they both passed. And so that's kind of where I was, and I was in a really dark place when I wrote it. I was in a really angry place, very depressed, very, very lost without them. That void, they tell you about grief, and and I'm sure maybe you guys can people watching can understand, like, grief comes in waves. It's not just one thing that hits you and suddenly you get over it. It keeps coming, and it
Yep.
shows back up just as soon as you feel like you're getting, like, life's normalizing, and you're getting accustomed to this vacancy, these voids in your life, and then suddenly, bang, they're not there anymore. And the whole cycle starts over again. So that's where that song came from. And then if you continue to listen when that song ends, it's the last song on the record. I put my brother's voicemail on there. He left the last voicemail he left the night before he died. He died sleep the next and they found him next morning. But he left me a voicemail, and I put that on as sort of a secret track on the record, just to immortalize him. But also, when you lose people, like my grandmother died on my birthday when I was 13 from alcoholism. And I don't remember her voice. I got pictures of her, but I don't remember what she sounds like. So I didn't want that same thing to happen with my brother. So I wanted to make sure I had that voicemail. So, and now everybody else does too. Everybody that's going to buy or
you're
listen
getting me
to
a
the
little
record.
bit here, that's a powerful story, and my heart goes out to you.
It's real, and that's, thank you.
I'm sorry that you had
real.
to
And
experience that, and definitely understand grief and loss very, very well.
oh,
Um, so man, but what an amazing album, and the way that you put
thank you.
everything together. And I think that what you just said kind of segued into my last round of questions, which is probably going to be a little bit wordy, so you're going to have to follow me on this one. But it's going to tie together a lot of what we had talked about. We talked about how your CDs had changed over time and development.
Mhm.
One of the things that we really hadn't talked about is there is a heavy spiritual element to a lot of your songs, especially like Unveiled, with the the Isis and
Mm.
Ishtar and Kali and then Kronos, and so that's always been a kind of a question mark in my mind of like, what is it that about that particularly, are you a spiritual person? Are you communicating that through your music, or is that a metaphor or representation of something that you believe in a different way?
I think it might be a little bit of both. I mean, I am a spiritual person. As an artist, it'd be hard for me to deny that creating something out of nothing is not is. I mean, I do that. That's what we do as artists. We create something out of nothing, So I don't know, and I think that for me, seeing that most of the world, and especially Western culture, is ruled by a patriarchal God, and so it was important. And even though you go back and if you actually read the ancient texts of Judaic and Christian, so forth and so on, I mean, there were women that were deeply involved in all of these, in the, I guess the the mass production, I would say, of Christianity and these other religions, but they were taken out by certain people who didn't want women to have political power or religious power. And so it was important for me because I look back at, because of my mom and the way that she raised us, and always having a hungry mind and wanting to know things, um, being told that women didn't have anything to do with uh, certain aspects of Christianity. Well, when Jesus was crucified, the men ran. He even warned them, when the clock strikes 12, you'll deny me, or when the crow, whatever. No, when the rooster crows, you'll deny me two times, or whatever he says. I can't remember that part, but I know that the men all ran. The people that stayed with Jesus crucified, according to the story, were the women. And there were women disciples, but they've all been left out of the books. And those books were chosen by particular people in order to maintain this sort of patriarchal. And I don't hate all men. Please don't take this as I'm hating. I don't hate men. I do.
We're
I just
good.
want to make sure that women get their. I know, but listen, some of your viewers will be like, "Oh my God, that's another feminazi." Blah blah blah.
Nah, we'll
We
find them
Um,
don't think
together.
that, yeah, we don't
yeah, all
think that you're.
right, let's go. Thank you. But the thing is that the stories of Isis, which was she in ancient Egypt, which my name is ancient Egyptian. It's from the 18th dynasty, named after the heretic pharaoh Amenhotep the fourth, who later became Akhenaten, who was the father of King Tut, husband of Nefertiti. Um, but when the pharaoh got his power by sitting on the throne was the seat of Isis. So he only got his power by sitting on the throne of Isis, sitting on the lap of Isis. She, the mother goddess, she was the one. And you go through all the pagan religions. They call them pagan now, but they were religions at the time. Um, you know those the goddesses meant a lot to those particular worshipers. And so I like to remind people of that, and especially women, like to remind them of their power and where we used to be oracles. We used to be, we were, in our society, when they had the Salem witch trials and all of that was going on here and all that hysteria was happening in America, we're still taught to fear the witches, not the people that burned them, not the people that
Right.
burned them or drowned them or crushed them. We're taught to fear the witches, the healers, the people that know about, that were actually, you know, uh, knew about nature and how to heal sickness and those types of things. So, we're taught to fear them, but not the people that murdered them and burned them alive. I mean, it's a little strange. So, for me, I wanted to bring those kinds of things to people's attentions because they're important to me. And I am a spiritual person. But if I ever speak to the other side or something, I feel like I look back at the past where people and even some modern religions do this as well. If anybody's watching over me in the ethereal world beyond the veil, it's probably my loved ones. It's probably the loved ones past. So that's who I talk to. That's who I speak to. That's who I try to
It's the
honor with
ancestors, right?
everything that the ancestors. That's right.
Yeah. So
And
we got the opportunity. I'm doing my very first ayahuasca journey this weekend, and
wow.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to go meet my ancestors. So I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, I absolutely love what you're saying there. Now you mentioned something that about men, and I've heard that before as a fan of yours, that people have accused you of men hate and stuff like that. I guess I have a question in relation to that, but from a more positive standpoint. What do
Hmm.
you consider positive masculine traits? What should men, in your opinion, look to emulate? What would you like to tell your fans about how a man should be? What are masculine traits that should be admired?
Geez, I don't know. Because I don't look at gender that way. I don't, to me, the idea of gender is sort of manufactured. I mean, I have short hair. I'm wearing a sweatshirt. I have deep voices. I've got tattoos. Um, I didn't play with dolls when I was a kid. I wasn't interested in it. So I don't know. Like every people that have accused me of being a man hater and in fact, because I wrote Menacide from my first album, which is about rapists and pedophiles and predators and those type of things. A lot well, we call them incels now, but they used to call themselves meninists instead of feminists. They're meninists. They're men's rights groups.
Okay, I haven't heard that one before. I'm
I
sorry.
didn't make it
Try
up.
not to
That's what
laugh. It didn't work.
they called it. That's their word, not mine. But they gave me the Society of Meninists actually gave me an award. I didn't accept. I accepted it remotely, but they gave me Psychopath of the Century award for writing that song. And
For
I
being
just
against
said
pedophiles and rapists?
yes, and yes, and that's
Yeah.
why, and that's what I was saying is like, but so it just boggles my mind that you're so offended by the fact that you should be on my side attacking that. You should be on my side attacking that. So, but if let's just say I'll go with you on your this thought process of typical gender roles, what let's say American society. I feel like um uh good traits are being I can say this: the best gift parents can give to their children is to love each other, and if
Mm,
not love each other, is to be kind to each other, because that's how you learn. You see
right.
how your father treats your mother treats your father, or if they're not together or if they're together. I would say that um, a father, a good masculine trait would be a protector, would be a teacher. Not necessarily I'm not the like the not to be a paid teacher, but and that's fine too. But I just mean like someone who teaches things to their friends, but someone who also stands up for women and other people that need to be stood up for. There is a lack of voices sometimes. I feel like um, when it comes to men in certain places, because they don't want to be seen as weak, or they don't want to be seen as um uh, outside the whatever their clique is, whatever the
Well, I
rules their
think that
clique lives by. um
I,
so
oh, I was gonna
you
say
tell
is I
me.
think I loved your answer, and I think that
Oh,
that that speaks pretty well to our audience. I think a lot of our veterans pride themselves on being protectors and
Yeah.
standing up for others and defending those that can't defend themselves. I mean, we're sheepdogs for a reason. And that's what we
Mhm.
were put on earth to do. And and
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for all of veterans, but obviously I carry that feeling quite strongly. And yeah, I thought that it was a great answer. I think that what I took from what you said is it's more important to be a good human, to
It
spread
is.
love and joy and peace and to have humility and to care about each other. And that definitely speaks to us and it's the message that we try to promote. And so I thought that was beautiful.
Thank you. And I tell you, I mean, honestly, thank you for saying that. But honestly, some of the worst feminists I've ever met are women. Truly.
Yeah.
Some of the and some of the best feminists. And to me, feminism just means equal. Equal. If you can do the job, you can do the job. If you can, we shouldn't be. Women shouldn't if they want to be if they want to play the old role of a housewife and all that, good for them. That's on them. Great. But we shouldn't be designated or legislated into those roles. And honestly, I've seen in my travels, some of the best people who have stood up for women, stood up for women's rights and all of that have been men. And in some cases, women have been a little bit of an issue. Lauren Beaufort. Sorry about that. So,
Well,
Marjorie
that
Taylor
brings
Greene.
me to probably my last question for you today. And this is the
I
one
do
that
love Matt. Everybody, please. I don't want this to go
oh
weird.
no, of
No, you're
Of
good.
Every,
course, you did a
okay.
fantastic job explaining yourself.
All
I don't
right.
think there's anyone in our audience would have any doubt or any argument with what you just said because we
None.
say worse than that all the time. And we are a defender of rights, human rights. It doesn't matter who that person is, and so we believe in that very strongly. But I want to go back, and now this is a personal question about me and just me wanting to know you a little bit as a person. Sevistra spoke to me because in there you have lyrics that say, "I just can't be comfortable in my skin." And when I heard that for the first time, it's hard not to tear up just even saying the words. That spoke to me so much because I definitely identified for much of my life as somebody who could not become comfortable in their own skin. And then I've went through this personal transformation in the last 3 years of my life to where I feel like I've ascended above that and I found my way through that. And then I was able to find my own identity and I was able to find some comfort in my skin because I became an authentic version of myself. In your own personal journey from 20 years ago to today, I loving your music, following the CDs around, just watching you seem to be a very healthy individual. Have you found comfort in your skin? How has your own personal journey been?
uh, Thank you for sharing your experience. That means quite a lot to me. Thank you. Yes and no. I, I, I is a lot of people. I guess people see maybe people will hear the music and they hear how loud I am on an album or they go to a show and they see how raucous I am on stage and crazy and and unleashing all this emotion up there, but I'm actually kind of an introvert personally. And that's because I usually deal with a lot of self-doubt and insecurity and about who I am, about what I look like, uh, if I'm a good writer or not, if I'm a good singer, if I'm so I really focus on trying to be a better human and be a better writer and a better spokesperson because I know that you know there's a lot of people um, who have been affected by what I've written and the things that I say in a positive way, and I fear letting them down. So in some ways, yes, I am. I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with who I am, and I discovered powerlifting, and I'm really fucking strong. So I'm really happy about that. But
Get it.
um, yeah, man, I deadlift 335 pounds, and
Holy
that's
crap.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I don't, I'm a all natural vegan lifter, so I don't, women won't jack up, men won't even really jack up that much unless you're just, it's just genetic, unless you're like, you're doping or something. But, and respect, do what you want to do. I don't care. It's not my, no judgment here. But I'm still struggling, and I think I'll probably struggle for the rest of my life with who I am, and all the things that I don't like about me. So, but luckily, art helps me navigate those very troubled waters, and
Well,
that's what I've used it for my whole
well,
life.
let me be the first to tell you that you are awesome, and
Oh,
your fans appreciate you and love you very much, and what you do and how you do it, and your authenticity, and just even being courageous enough to answer that question on a stage like this. And that's
mm,
impressive. And that shows a lot about your strength and intestinal fortitude and who you are as a person. And that's all we could ever hope to be, myself included, and everyone else. It's like imposter syndrome. I think I listened to a woman speak the other day. They said it should have never been called syndrome, it should have been called experience, because everybody suffers from it, right? um
yeah,
you can only do the best that you can, and trying to be the best human that you can be. But I'll tell you what, I thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. Hopefully, as we wrap this up today, if you could stick around for a few minutes after we're done, I got some information for you that I think would be really good. But I congratulations on the new album. It's
thank you.
absolutely fantastic. Everybody out there that is listening, you should definitely go pick up a copy of The Godslayer. It got released today, September 15th. You need to go buy it. It is, if you're an OTEP fan, you are going to absolutely love this album. It's as good as any album that's been out. And I think it, like we had talked about in this podcast, it's going to be one of those albums that over time is going to be appreciated even more, because there's a lot of raw emotion, a lot of authenticity, a lot of interpretation that I think it's going to take time to appreciate for some people. But I
Mhm.
found it to be absolutely fantastic, and it was a beautiful album. So thank
Thank you.
you so much for offering to do this for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Both of you guys. Thank you very much.
I did want to say real quick, one of the things you just said that you were worried about was letting your
Mhm.
fans down. I think the words you have given, there's nothing to be let down. You've done your job. I mean, anything you come out with, it's just sugar on top at this point. There's nothing to be let down. Your words are so impactful to the core that people aren't going to be let down by anything you put out.
Thank you. I hope so. Thank you very much for saying that, though. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right. Well,
Thank you,
if you're
guys.
out there still listening, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss future episodes. And you can visit us on the web at www.thestonedapespodcast.com. I know I added too many W's, but you can live with that. And for this episode, the Stoned
www.
Apes are out.